Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Popcorn Bucket List, the podcast that keeps your movie bucket list up to date because those 1,000 movies to see before you die lists are just too daunting. I'm your host and resident post-apocalyptic adventurer from the Valley of the Wind, Gracie.
And I'm Daryl, a guy trying to keep his cursed right arm in check. If you can see the video, I'm holding it back because I'm just cringe completely.
And I am Sarah, and I'm here to see with eyes unclouded by hate. So be as cringy as you want.
Thank you.
Well, I don't know if that tells you exactly what movies we're talking about today, but we decided to go in a maybe couple episode deep dive into Studio Ghibli. And I think that we're gonna have a lot of fun. I know we've already done a lot of exciting stuff with this, and I know you guys should have a lot of fun. And if you haven't seen them, definitely recommend seeing them before you listen to this. I mean, or at least seeing the two that we're going to probably talk about today, which I'll tell you guys later. But yeah, maybe just going a little bit into Studio Ghibli. Daryl, do you want to bring us into that first couple bits, or do you want me to go into
Yeah,
it?
sure. Yeah. So, in the animation industry, there are a few studios as revered as Studio Ghibli. Studio Ghibli is a Japanese animation film studio founded in 1985 by the now legendary Hayao Miyazaki. While not the only director at the studio, he is the most renowned, having directed many of the company's most beloved films, including Spirited Away, Ponyo, and My Neighbor Totoro. His films are known for their magical worlds, detailed animation, and weirdly, their mouth-watering food. Like, seriously, if you've ever seen a bowl of ramen in one of his movies, you'll be like, I want to go to a fancy Japanese restaurant and get some because that looks delicious.
Oh my God. So mouth-watering. Now I want some ramen. In 1986, the Walt Disney Company formed a partnership with Studio Ghibli, becoming the sole international distributor and financing up to 10% of the studio's production costs. For a long time, Ghibli films were really hard to come by because they were never distributed digitally. You could only watch them through hard copies, which I know definitely contributed to the fact that I didn't see them until later. Mainly this week. And while Disney partnered to distribute their films for a while, their partnership deteriorated over time due to their inability to learn and market to Western audiences. In 2017, Disney renounced its claim to Ghibli production, but still remains the sole distributor for home video rights, so they still sell the physical copies. Thankfully, though, now because of the, I guess because they've parted ways with Disney production rights, we can at least watch 21 films on HBO Max here if you're in the States. I think if you're not in the States, there are certain countries where you can watch them on Netflix. So they're definitely a lot more easily accessible. Everything I watched over the past week was on HBO Max, and it was all laid out in a nice little hub of Studio Ghibli films, and it was perfect. But yeah, today we are gonna kind of jump into two big ones. We're gonna talk about Studio Ghibli's first film, Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, and then we're gonna also talk about Princess Mononoke, which came out in 1997, which was the first Disney affiliated film. And Daryl actually came up with this idea, so I thought maybe Daryl, you could kind of start us off.
Yeah, sure. So basically I just kind of want to talk about the differences and the similarities because I picked these two movies specifically because one, they're like my favorites, but also they're really, really similar thematically. Like a lot of his films deal with nature. Like if you haven't noticed, Hayao Miyazaki is definitely a tree hugger. He loves talking about the balance between man and nature, and it's just a fascinating topic that he explores in basically almost every single one of his movies. And so yeah, I kind of wanted to talk about these two just because not only are they have the same theme, they even have similar protagonists. And they have just some things that are kind of inverted that are similar. Like one movie, like Nausicaa, for example, has a young girl as the protagonist, while Princess Mononoke has a young man as protagonist, and yet they both have people of the opposite gender who are actually kind of the supporting character and doing similar things. It's just interesting how they're very, very related. It's almost as if Princess Mononoke is in a sense like a spiritual successor to Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. So I guess I don't know. I guess first I want to talk about like what did y'all think of the movies in general? Like what did you like about them? What stood out to you about them?
So for our audiences, I'd love to at least just do a little bit bio on the two movies. Just in case you haven't seen it in a while. Like Daryl, you said the last time you watched Nausicaa was like 5, 10 years ago, and then we watched it this week. Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind came out in 1984. It's the first Studio Ghibli film. In a post-apocalyptic future, a young girl seeks to keep the peace between the forces of nature and the hubristic human survivors who long to regain their power. And then Princess Mononoke came out in 1997, and it is basically about after a young warrior has a curse set on him by a boar god or a demon, he searches for a cure and finds himself in the middle of a war between the forest gods and the people of Iron Town. And it's very similar. Like if you take it, it's nature versus people, and man, and just in those short biography, like we wrote those separately. Daryl wrote Nausicaa's and I wrote Princess Mononoke, and we basically boiled it down to the same concept. And I like that that kind of happened. But Sarah, you're definitely more of the Studio Ghibli like diehard, so I'd love to hear your opinions first.
Yeah. They've made my two of my lists, my comfort films and my top five of all time. So yeah, I'm a huge fan. I just rewatched Princess Mononoke 2 days ago. Taggart hadn't seen it before, so it was really fun to watch it with him. And I kind of forgot how much I love this movie. I don't think I'd seen it since high school, and it's just like so brutal and so beautiful, and like just the juxtaposition of like the people in town and like how they act, and then like the secluded strangeness of nature and like the spirits that live in the forest is just, I love it so much. And yeah, Daryl shared a video with us earlier about like the sound design in a lot of Ghibli movies, and I kind of want to like just rewatch all of them right now, including both of those, because like it is so cool to like hear how fast all of like the sound is in Princess Mononoke and how it really just keeps up the momentum of that movie. Like it is powerful. That whole movie is so powerful and so quick, and like it doesn't feel like it's as long as it is because it just never stops moving.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it is an interesting difference between those two movies. And Nausicaa is it's a kind of a slower film,
Mm-hmm.
which is interesting because like so Nausicaa and Prince Mononoke are thematically similar, but like Prince Mononoke is like an action film
Yes.
basically.
Yeah.
It's like an epic fantasy action film, and Nausicaa is kind of a it's more of a just more of a journey for one character as she's just trying to protect her hometown effectively.
They go about it
Uh
differently. It's if you think
yeah.
about it, like Ashitaka doesn't want violence but chooses violence when needed and is definitely violent. Whereas Nausicaa chooses violence once and then never wants to do it again. And
Yeah.
and it definitely like drives her, whereas violence doesn't necessarily drive Ashitaka, but it's he you can see the resentment, I guess, of trying to use violence.
Yeah, I mean, they both want peace effectively. That's all they want. They just want peace between their world and effectively the spirit world. Um they just kind of go about it in different ways. Nausicaa's is very much like I'm going to go like I trying to fight people doesn't work for me because if I do that, I feel incredibly guilty. So I try to get them to stop, and I would rather like commune with nature. And I feel like Ashitaka's role is more like I can be violent, I can go and attack people, but I can also try and not just quell the violence in their hearts, but also the violence in the hearts of the natural forces, which doesn't always quite work as well as he wants it to. Honestly, a lot of time he's still kind of people still try to stab him anyway. whether they live in the forest or they live in town. But it's just interesting how one person's kind of more violent path is I don't know, it's just more it's just interesting how it's more dangerous for them. And because like Ashitaka he ends up going through a lot of pain and suffering, really, just because he has to choose this specific path. While Nausicaa, on the other hand, she does end up at a point where she basically dies, but throughout the film, it's more like emotional distress that she has to go through, kind of learning like, oh, you people are going to attack my town. This guy I just met who's from your town is telling me now that you are going to attack my town. This is ridiculous. This is crazy. So yeah, like they're similar people, but they have different ways of doing things. And in the end, they both kind of succeed. I would say Nausicaa's a little more successful.
Yeah.
Because Ashitaka, he does succeed in Princess Mononoke, but at the same time, it's like, cool, the gods are dead now.
Yeah.
Good job, I guess.
I don't think they're gone though. You know, with the little Kodama at the end, little
Yeah, the
shaky
Kodama
guy.
are still
He's like,
there.
we're back. It's healing.
hmm It feels more like when you're watching Princess, it's like magic is starting to fade out of the world. You're kind of watching it happen in real time. And like Nausicaa is like far, far into the future where it's like, in a sense, oh, it's come back. Like these natural
Yeah.
forces are here now and they're really, really powerful and we really cannot stop them
Mhm.
despite the fact that they're trying. But Princess Mononoke kind of ends a little bit sadly when you kind of see like the deer god at the end just get his, he's like, thanks, I got my head back. I'm gonna peace out. I'm dead now.
Yeah.
And all you really get is the Kodama at the very, very end, kind of
Yeah.
like, we're still here. We're still alive.
Yeah.
Don't worry about us. But also that one's more of a period piece anyway, because it takes place in an actual like
Actual
real
time
era
period. Yeah. I
of
think it
human
was like
history.
1337 in Japan, which
Yeah.
I don't know the era off the top of my head.
Yeah, it was like in like a 200-year period that could have taken place, and it's like at least it's based off of something real, so it makes sense. It's kind of like when you're watching it's kind of like Lord of the Rings, where it's like magic is gone, but we were watching the story of when magic was real and when all
Mhm.
these races existed. That's kind of what it feels like watching Princess, I guess.
I'm gonna butcher this, but it's the Moromachi period, which
Okay.
is 1336 to 1573.
Okay. Yeah. So
So,
it's a real
um,
time and place.
and it feels like it. It definitely, like, there are references to war. They talk about the samurai invading the Iron Town because they want the iron. Which is like a conflict in itself, but it's not really a conflict dedicated to the story. It's like more like a power drive for like to make it more urgent. You
hmm
know,
It's more
for
just infighting in between basically
yeah.
one faction, which is humanity.
It's like reminding you that, hey, humanity is super violent, and like, but like
hmm
so is nature. Like I didn't find that the violence ever subsided. I knew nothing about that film, and all I got from Sarah was it's bloody. And I don't know if I wish I knew that going into it, or if I hadn't known that going into it, because I started the day off watching Spirited Away in the morning and then watched Princess at Mononoke at like the afternoon. And whoa, that's a drastic difference. He slices a man's arms off like in one go. And I remember I watched it with Ross, and we both were like, whoa, this is a different type of movie. Like,
hmm
ooh. And even Nausicaa is not violent. Like, you don't see, it's not bloody. It's not like, it's more like nature is violent, like by its overtaking and that kind of thing. But it's not gory, almost, in a way. Like, it definitely feels like Miyazaki was trying to prove a point. Like,
Oh yeah. Well, I
hmm
mean, Princess Mononoke is very much a story about hate. I
yeah.
mean, it's set in like the beginnings of the movie and throughout that, like I don't think it would have been as effective to not show that hate with that power behind it. And it is brutal. Nature is brutal, guns are brutal. And yeah.
And it's all around brutal. Like, it
hmm
like every character has a brutality to it, whether it's our main character Ashitaka or the side characters, like every character has some form of brutality that, like, the women in Irontown, are, you know, women who are loving that the fact that they have a second chance in life, but they're also like willing to defend it by tooth and nail and destroy other people for it. And it's
Mm-hmm.
so cool, like, to see. Sorry, my camera went out. So cool to see, like, that, and especially in that film, that everybody has a good and a bad side, and, like, that there's balance in that, and that you kind of almost have to have that in order to, you know progress in life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And
I
like
feel like
speaking of, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I feel like Lady Eboshi is like kind of one of the characters that really does start to lose herself the most, because
Mm,
like she kind of dedicated her life to her town, and like, part of that being like saving these women and giving them a second chance and giving them like real jobs and proving that they are just as strong as the men in that town. And then she's like, they'll be fine without us. We got to keep going.
Yeah.
yes, yeah, that's
Like,
what I was actually
whoa,
going to talk
girl.
about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to talk about the
Our antagonists.
yeah, the antagonists of the film, because I can't call them bad guys because they're antagonists. They're not bad guys.
They have their
Because
reasons for wanting to do what they're doing.
yeah, and it's like you can understand it where it's like Kushana and Nausicaa is like, these are actual monsters. They're trying to kill
Yeah.
us. I want them to stop. I'm going to kill them all if I have to. Her reasoning in her mind is sound. And we get, okay, yeah, they are big scary bugs, but also it's like you're antagonizing them, so you're making it worse. And then Lady Eboshi, it's kind of a same thing where it's like she wants to dominate nature because she's trying to help humanity. She's trying to help
Yeah.
the people in her town. She doesn't just want to, it's not just because she's like, oh, I want to go kill people because I'm bored. I want to go kill the gods because I've got nothing to do on a Saturday. She actually
Mhm.
has a genuine reason. Although it is interesting how, unlike Kushana, Lady Eboshi, as you said, does just kind of lose herself. She just kind of gets so wrapped up in her desire to destroy these beasts, grab the head of the deer god and basically sell it
Throw
off
it
so she
off.
can,
Yeah.
yeah, so she can gain the power she needs to eventually, as she says, take over the country. She uses the
Yep.
word country when she's saying take over. So
Yeah.
she becomes a little megalomaniacal. Yes, that's a word.
It
That is a
was.
word.
Definitely.
Yes.
We got there.
Thank you.
Another big thing, they're both female, like, antagonists, and
Mhm.
powerful female antagonists. Like, Kushana is like badass. Like, she rolls up in there and she's like, this is what we're doing. This is how we do it. If you don't follow my rules, then get out. Like, no, like, and then when, she kind of not loses her way, but like definitely like has to address fear in her story. Like, and Nausicaa has to like almost prove her wrong. She takes that and goes, I want to learn from Nausicaa, but I
Mhm.
also know I'm right. Like,
Yeah.
she takes it and goes, yes, I get it. There's Nausicaa has a point, but I'm here to protect, this, and I want to do this. And I mean, in the same boat, I think eventually take over whatever, they have at that time, the land. And Eboshi is like literally mirror images of that, except she doesn't find herself anew. She loses herself. And I think that that makes it kind of cool that she has that almost comeuppance in the end of the movie. Like, the wolf head
Mhm.
always bites back, or something like that. I don't
Yeah.
remember how she says, but yeah, it's almost kind of gives you that little bit of justification. You're like, oh, at least someone got what was coming to them, you know. But like powerful female lead, and I had started off Princess Mononoke thinking that she was gonna be, San was gonna be the main character, because I was like, well, it's called Princess Mononoke, like, and then we're introduced to a prince, and I was like, well, shit, guess not. So yeah, I really had fun. I was super excited to finally I'd never heard of Nausicaa until Daryl introduced me, and I really knew nothing about Princess Mononoke. These are probably some of the least that I've ever seen visuals of, and honestly, I had so much fun watching them. They were the worlds were beautifully, like, how do I explain it? They drew me in, I guess, intoxicating.
Mhm.
I guess that's the best way of. I mean, I watched a lot of Ghibli films this week, so they were all very intoxicating, and like that, I felt myself engrossed, and it was like one of those things. Like I never looked at my phone, I never picked up anything. I just sat and enjoyed the music and the environment and the sounds and the characters, and it was just so. Oh, I don't even know. Yeah.
Yeah, I think world building is what, Studio Ghibli and Miyazaki do best, because like you could have a Silmarillion's worth of information about every one of these movies' worlds, but you don't need it because he just throws you right into the middle of like this, what is happening? I don't know, but I'm accepting all of it, and it's beautiful and it's amazing and it unfolds as it needs to, and it's engrossing, and like enough of it is rooted in reality that you feel like you're a part of it, and enough of it is fantastical that you can't stop watching.
Yeah, and I feel like a big part of that is, as we discussed in both these films, it's like spirits and nature are a big thing. And I think it's interesting because it's something that as humans we can all kind of understand, that idea of like, what's out there, what's controlling the universe, what gods do you pray to? And so it's interesting how in both of these movies, like they kind of approach nature slash spirits in a different way. Because like in a Nausicaa, it's like it's less spirits and more like actual like legitimate force of nature, like the Ohm, these big gigantic isopods basically just running around. It's like they can go around and destroy everything. They don't have to, but they can. That's how powerful they are. That's how like horrifying they can be. But they can also just be these very calm just creatures just living their lives. I mean, there's a part in the movie where my favorite part of the movie, it's just about creatures in general. At the very beginning, Nausicaa is introduced to this little creature, a little fox squirrel that she names Tato. And it's my favorite moment in the movie because when she touches the creature for the first time, it bites her finger. And it's one of those moments you're like, see, nature's scary because it'll bite you. But Nausicaa just kind of, she reacts, but she doesn't like shake her hand or like throw it to the ground or something. She lets it bite her because she's like, of course it's gonna bite me. It's scared. It doesn't know who I am. I'm just some person who just put my hand next to it. She takes that moment, accepts it, and then Tato very slowly releases his mouth, licks the wound, and is like, "Oh, okay, we're friends now. We're cool." And
Mhm.
so that I loved that moment. First of all, it made me like love the protagonist. I was like, "This is a great character," but it also just went to show like how there's that duality in nature where it can be very, very harsh, but also very, very gentle. And all the creatures in Nausicaa, none of them speak, none of them say anything. They're just, you know, effectively animals. And then you get to Prince Mononoke, and it's like, oh, these ones are actually talking to me. These ones actually, not only can they like speak, in, I don't know if it's like telepathy or something like that, but they're not just speaking; they're having full on conversations. They're having very long, like philosophical diatribes about this and that, and whether humanity is worth saving, and this idea that you know spirits in this particular movie are more than just creatures. They are actual like embodiments of everything that is happening around them and how humanity likes to ignore them. So, and I just find that kind of stuff very, very interesting in these movies. Too long didn't read. I like that the wolf talks in the Princess Mononoke.
I can't remember his deer's name. I love him so much though.
Yeah, I think it was like something like that.
Cajole,
Bejeweled.
But I love that San talks to him. And like I'm
Mhm.
bummed that we don't get to hear it, but
Yeah,
like
cool.
Yeah, cool. Yeah,
cool.
that's it.
Yeah.
I was like screaming for him that whole movie. Oh,
Yeah,
I'm
when he
like,
gets he gets a little shot,
no.
and you're like, no.
Yeah.
I was like, if he dies, I will.
And he's like, stop it, save your
Yeah.
energies. Like, I'm not leaving.
Mm,
He is the best movie horse deer thing. I love him. I do like that I guess the animal companion is something that it's like the one kind of thing you see in Ghibli movies. It also appears a lot in Disney movies. It's the animal
Mm-hmm.
companion.
Yeah.
Happens all the time. So I guess there are just some things that all cultures like. It's having an animal as a friend.
But also like a spiritual mentor. I mean, I
Hmm.
feel like that's definitely something that threads through, Ghibli, like even in other films, like you have Kiki who has Gigi, and hers is, Gigi kind of guides her through childhood, and then, you know, when she becomes who she is, no longer needs Gigi, like that kind of thing.
Hmm.
And I feel like that's definitely, spoilers if you haven't seen Kiki. Um, I feel like that's definitely something that like is understood in all cultures, that like, animals are very like, and especially animals that we connect to as humans are very, spiritual and keep us grounded. And I think that that's a really cool theme that almost just kind of goes unnoticed in a lot of the films, especially a lot of the films that I watched over the course of the week. I think I watched 5 this week. So yeah, 5. So had a long week.
It has been lots of Ghibli films have been watched by all
Yeah,
of us
yeah,
Yeah.
in preparation for this episode where we're only talking about 2. But
2. Yeah. Well,
that's
we
fine.
changed
We're
the
going to talk
subject
about
this
more of
morning.
them later.
We changed the subject this morning.
We did. We pivoted just a little bit. That way we can talk about more in the future.
So I was doing some like, light digging on Princess Mononoke, and I noticed that they actually kind of used some significant CGI, which I think was weird for Studio Ghibli. I don't know. I would love, Daryl, do you know anything about it? I know that
Yeah.
beforehand that was like unheard of.
Hmm.
So yeah, like Nausicaa is straight animation and like no computer graphics whatsoever.
Yeah,
I
because
feel
I
like
mean,
you
for the
could
most part,
tell.
it's hand drawn. Yeah, you could.
Yeah.
It's really obvious because, like, I mean, he was just doing hand drawn animation for a very very long time, and it was kind of the first time they experimented with CG was in Princess Mononoke. So like some things you'll see like transitions where like the trees like morph into like bushes or morph into grass or something like that or CG. And I think there are some moments where he's like holding his arm or something and it looks kind of CG.
He's like bubbly.
Yeah, it's
Is that
like
why?
some of those little bubbles kind of look like they're CGI, but it's interesting because it's not super obtrusive.
Mm,
Like it's only funny because I have a weird comparison is Treasure Planet. Like I
interesting.
love Treasure Planet. It's one of my favorite
Mm-hmm.
movies ever, but the CG is very startling because it's
Obvious.
like yeah, it doesn't mesh very well with the hand drawn animation. So yeah, Prince Mononoke is like it's not the only one that he uses CGI in, but it was probably the most obvious usage that I can think of right now. Uh, I do know that by the time they got to like Ponyo, basically he was like, "We're not going to use that anymore." Like they literally shuttered their 3D animation department for that specific movie because they're like, "We are not using it at all in this movie." Just like that commitment, geez, that's kind of unnecessary, but all right, I appreciate it. Um, but yeah, like the animation in those movies, I guess in the 2 that we're actually talking about is kind of different because like it's mainly in specific characters because one is more of an action movie and one is more of kind of a slow burn like adventure. Specific things like animals running or very specifically San running. There's a scene where she runs into Irontown and just like starts trying to attack everybody. She's specifically trying to assassinate Lady Eboshi, and it's like the way she moves is like weird. Funnily enough, like the most cliche kind of like anime run I've
Anime.
ever
You're like,
seen. It's the most cliche anime thing I've seen in
Mm-hmm.
any of his movies, but it's awesome because it's so different from everything else you ever see in his movies. You never see that kind of stuff.
it makes her
It's
seem more like animal.
yeah, it's like it's
Yeah.
scary because it's like she's moving at an inhuman speed,
Mm.
like in the sound that she makes, like she sounds like an arrow moving through the wind. Basically, it's awesome. It's really really cool, and
Yeah.
the way she fights, the way she runs, the way she ducks, the way she parries, it's like so different from every other character. But also like the sound design helps to sell all that. really, really well because he just sounds like a force of nature as opposed to a person fighting with a knife. So
Oh, the sound design for the weapons in that film
Mm.
is something like so beautiful. Like the thwipping of like thwipping, not Spider-Man, but like the thwipping of like the knife slicing through the air is so, it cuts you. Like
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
feel it, and like the gunshots and
His
like the,
arrows too.
yes, his
Like,
arrows soaring through. It's so beautiful. And like I think that's like the one thing about Miyazaki I love is his wind sound and like his use of air in film. And like whether that's lack of or, you know, sufficient amount, you know. I think he just truly understands air and its effect on sound and, you know, nature around us and everything, you know, from how we breathe to how animals breathe to how we move within the wind, that kind of thing. I mean, especially because in Nausicaa, the wind plays a big part of that. You know, she lives in the wind valley, you know, or the
Yeah.
valley of the wind. So it's a big, like that's a big one, especially in like the first 2 seconds. I think you hear wind and you're like, this is what you're about to get yourself into. Like, here's what nature sounds like. You know, here's what it sounds like in the valley. Here's what it sounds like in, you know, the middle of the forest that's taking over, you know, a poisonous forest, you know, and the lack thereof of rustling of grass and, you know, rustling of trees. It's gorgeous. And definitely if you're watching it or rewatching it, notice that, like appreciate that, you know? But yeah.
Yeah, definitely. There's a video that I had shared with our group about specifically about the sound of Miyazaki films, and it's like go watch that. It's by this guy called Captain Christian on YouTube. It's an awesome, awesome video about just the sound of Miyazaki films. Highly recommend it. Um,
mhm.
but yeah, I mean that's just how he rolls though. That's how Miyazaki rolls. It's like I'm gonna make a movie that's gonna make you feel like you were there.
Hmm.
I want you to feel like you were living in this space and that the characters you are seeing are real people living their actual lives. No matter how fantastical you're in this space, like come with me on this journey for 2 hours.
Yeah, and
That's
I
why we
feel
like
like
him.
it also just adds to like each of those characters so much. Like when you hear like the sounds of their weapons, when you hear the sounds of their runs, when like you know exactly who is coming, and like it
Hmm.
really just gives each of those characters so much more depth. Like even the guns in Princess Mononoke, like they don't sound like your like classic gun. They sound like they're about to like burn the forest down. Like
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
exactly.
intense.
And you like hear the bullet and you hear the bullet hit its target or not hit its target. And it's just, oh, it like just captures that world so beautifully in just sound. Like it, yeah, definitely recommend. If you're gonna just like listen to it, listen to it. You don't even have to like pay attention. Just listen to it for a little bit. And any Miyazaki film, like
Hmm.
you don't have to limit yourself to Nausicaa or, you know, um, Princess Mononoke. You can listen to Totoro, which has this like fun juxtaposition of like, if you look at like, you know, Princess Mononoke, the hardness of like the guns and stuff like that, and the knives. Totoro is like the complete opposite. It, you know, is almost cartoonish. It has like little boings and, you know, like, you know, it has like different elements to set you in this world.
Yeah, even though they're basically about the same forest, like the same setting, they're
Hmm.
so different.
Well, so you guys may have noticed that this episode is a little shorter than our others. I don't know what our runtime ends up being. I'm sure Sarah will let us know later. But we wanted to give these films their due. So halfway through recording, we decided to do a deep dive mini series into Studio Ghibli. So we will see you next time for our next two films. We're going to do Ponyo and My Neighbor Totoro. So if you haven't seen them, check them out. I haven't seen Ponyo yet, so I'm going to go watch that after this. And I thank you guys for joining us. And uh, as we add more movies to your bucket list, because these both go onto your bucket list, like
Hmm.
please watch Nausicaa.
Absolutely.
Nausicaa is, oh, and then Princess Mononoke hits different. I don't know how to explain it. It just hits different. My name is Gracie.
It stabs you a little bit.
It stabs you a little bit.
It sure hits you.
Yeah, she gets you. My name is Gracie, and you can find me at Gracie May with a Y and 3 E's, and anywhere you see fit. Daryl, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Darth Daryl. That's Darth as in Vader, Sidious, Small, take your pick, and Daryl, Darrell. I'm sometimes there, I'm sometimes not. Nobody listens to my tweets, but please go ahead, try me.
And Sarah, what about you?
And I'm snotty_person on Twitter and snotty.person on Instagram. Both of those are snotty with an IE instead of a Y.
And check us out for podcast updates and movie news at the Popcorn Bucket List on Instagram and at TPB_podcast on Twitter, or just find us on whatever social media you use. I think we're pretty much on everything except for TikTok. Please don't find us if we're on TikTok. And tune in to our YouTube channel if you want to see our beautiful faces. Everybody smile. Cheese. And we'll be uploading the video version of this podcast on the Friday after it premieres. So I look forward to seeing you guys next time, where we'll talk about Ponyo and My Neighbor Totoro. Yee.
Very exciting.
Bye.
Goodbye.